Right on. Thanks, Joe. That was pretty fast and furious, but critical information for everybody to know. Obviously, you come to the workshop with the preconceived idea about, I want to learn about BDAs, right, or some structures. And what we're trying to teach and why it takes 4 days is talking about these principles that help you think through this, no matter what types of structures might come next or what modifications we make. The principles guide your thinking in this low-tech process-based restoration mindset. So really appreciate that. I've just got a couple questions here for you, Joe, and then we can move on. I've had a few folks chime in here, so I'll just summarize what I'm reading. But one of the participants was asking about, are these really all the principles we need to know to make a healthy riverscape, or is this some subset of them related to low tech?
That's a great question. Well, I mean, Jeremy, I'll kind of throw a little bit of that back at you. I mean, when we were trying to come up with, how many of these things, that was kind of interesting. I mean, you could take a whole career and study riverscapes from different angles, as a hydrologist, a geomorphologist, an ecologist, a limnologist, whatever. There's tons to know. This is our attempt to distill a bunch of things down into what seem to be the sort of salient points across riverscapes. And unlike our discussion about stage 0, I would argue that these principles hold up even in those strings between the beats. So yeah, there's always more. Our big cop-out, the one that saves our hide, well, there's two of them. It depends. And then streams need space. And so, what's buried in this, and we'll unpack in the planning module, is the mapping of valley bottoms and all that comes with that. It's actually really, really powerful. So I'll leave it at that.
Good. Well, I'm going to build off of that because there were a couple of related questions that I've seen. These are great, lofty principles, Joe, that you've laid out here when you talk about streams need space and stage 0. But we live in reality, right? And a lot of our participants live in environments or working lands even, where there's things going on in the valley bottom, whether it's actual development, corrals, hay meadows, on and on and on. What can you say for folks, maybe as a teaser of what's coming up in the following modules, and kind of just put that in context for them a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'm glad folks are picking up on that. I mean, it's pretty easy to listen to Colin, to listen to Mark, and even to listen to some of my rhetoric here, and be all inspired about, oh yeah, we just need to give all these riverscapes back. It's like, well, there's a lot of infrastructure and land use in those riverscapes, and as the precursor that you're talking about, that this is too, is yes, we have to be responsible adults, and we have to consider what's actually going on in those riverscapes and adjacent to them, and that's what we'll cover in the planning module. Yeah, I can lay out some great principles about what it would take for me to, be really fit and have six-pack abs and blah, blah, blah. And I understand that it takes me going to the gym every damn day and working really, really hard. I'm not doing that. I'm going to do a little bit of that. I'm going to aspire towards it, but I'm not, I'm not making it there every day, right? So a lot of our riverscapes are going to fall into that. Yeah, there's a few really hot athletes that are going to do great, and there's going to be some that, they've got a lot more potential than is being realized now, and let's just help them towards those loftier goals.
Great, thank you. And I guess just one final question here before we move on, and that is related to the 6 restoration principles that you laid out. And gosh, I think folks are picking up on that. Maybe this applies beyond low-tech PBR. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, I think aspects of it do. We gave a webinar for Society for Ecological Restoration with a much more sort of less riverscapes focused, more diverse group of ecological restoration practitioners. And yeah, I do think, self-sustaining is pretty hard to argue with. Deferring decision-making is an interesting one, where you can get away with that, where you cannot. As we'll see in the planning module, that's really about mapping space and mapping opportunity and risk. getting systems to do work, using natural building materials. I think all of those last four probably broadly apply. These other two, we'd probably have to think a little more carefully about whether or not those are good or not in particular other ecosystems.
Yeah, you know, I could add a little bit here too, just having worked with you through this thought process, and I'm sure we'll evolve and add more and refine these over time. But, you know, these concepts of, I do think have applicability to other types of ecological restoration. And I would say, from my perspective, it comes from this obsession with individual structures or individual things that we do, almost a precisionism mindset of trying to make everything so perfect, when what we need to do is hit the system with a big hammer. And we got to do a lot of it. And if one little thing fails, but you did a lot of it, there's redundancy, there's opportunities for other structures to kick in. And so I think some of these mental models that are being laid out are things that I'm taking into other parts of restoration. So for what it's worth, I see a lot of applicability to these concepts elsewhere as well.
Yeah, I mean, can I push you a little bit on, I mean, how do or don't these apply? I mean, you've been involved a lot in rangeland restoration and trying to, you know, deal with cheatgrass invasion, annual invasion, dealing with, you know, PJ conifer encroachment into sagebrush areas. Can you, like, is it those sort of last four? Or, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably examples I could think of given a little more time, but this concept of self-sustaining really hits me hard, because so often what we do are interventions that are absent of the bigger picture of what processes are we trying to fix. And so I think that needs to be something taken to the rest of the watershed, where we actually get to kind of the root causes and processes that are broken. Because like I laid out at the beginning, I've been in this fad of going back to the basics, you know, pulling out my old diagrams of what does the water cycle look like? What does the nutrient cycle look like? You know, all those things that I think if we go back to that and we try to find ways to make the system self-sustaining, it's the only way we're going to be able to address the problem we have at the scale that needs to be addressed. You can't provide life support all the time. So with that, Joe, I am going to wrap up this session and keep us moving along.
Yep.
And so I'll turn it back to you for the next steps here.